You know how Fox has a weird way of counting Simpsons episodes? They refuse to count a couple of them, making the amount of episodes inconsistent. Finding details about this missing episode is difficult. No one who was working on the show at the time likes to talk about it. For what has been pieced together, the lost episode was written entirely by Matt Groening during production of the first season. Matt started acting strangely. He was very quiet, seemed nervous and morbid. Mentioning this to anyone who was present resulted in them getting very angry or forbidding you to even mention it to Matt. I first heard of it at an event where Dave Silverman was speaking. Someone in the crowd asked about the episode, and Silverman simply left the stage, ending the presentation hours early. The episode's production number was 7G06. The title was Dead Bart. The episode's labeled 7G06. Moaning Lisa was made later, given Dead Bart's production code to hide the latter's existence. In addition to getting angry, asking anyone who was on the show about this will cause them to do everything they can to stop you from directly communicating with Matt Groening. At a fan event, I managed to follow him after he spoke to the crowd, and eventually had a chance to talk to him alone as he was leaving the building. He didn't seem upset that I followed him, probably expecting a typical encounter with an obsessive fan. When I mentioned the lost episode though, all colors drained from his face, and he started to tremble. When I asked him if he could tell me any details, he sounded like he was on the verge of tears. He grabbed a piece of paper, wrote something on it, and handed it to me. He begged me never to mention the episode again. The piece of paper had a website address on it. I would rather not to say what it is, for reasons you'll see in a second. I entered the address into my browser, and I came to a site that was completely black, except for a line of yellow text, a download link. I clicked on it, and a file started downloading. Once the file was downloaded, my computer went crazy. It was the worst virus I have ever seen. System restored didn't work. The entire computer had to be rebooted. Before doing this though, I copied the file onto a CD. I tried to open it on my now empty computer, and as I suspected, there was an episode of The Simpsons on it. The episode starts off like any other episode, but had a very poor quality animation. If you've seen the original animation for Some Enchanted Evening, it was similar but less stable. The first act was fairly normal, but the way the characters act was a little off. Homer seemed angrier. Marge seemed depressed. Lisa seemed anxious. But Bart seemed to have genuine anger and hatred for his parents. The episode was about the Simpsons going on a plane. Near the end of the first act, the plane was taking off. Bart, as you know, was fooling around, as you would expect him to do. However, as the plane was about 50 feet off the ground, Bart broke a window on the plane as he was sucked out. At the beginning of the series, Matt had an idea that the animation style of the Simpsons world represented life, and that death turned things more realistic. This was used in this episode. The picture of Bart's corpse was barely recognizable. They took full advantage of it not having to move, and made an almost photorealistic drawing of his dead body. Act 1 ended with a shot of Bart's corpse. When Act 2 started, Homer, Marge, and Lisa were sitting at the table crying. The crying went on and on. It got more pained and sounded more realistic. Better acting than you would think possible. The animation started to decay even more as they cried, and you could hear murmurs in the background. The characters could barely be made out. They were stretching and blurring. They looked like deformed shadows with random bright colors thrown on them. There were faces looking in the window, flashing in and out, so you were never sure what they looked like. This crying went on for all of Act 2. Act 3 opened with a title card saying, "1 year had passed." Homer, Marge, and Lisa were bone thin and still sitting at the table. There were no signs of Maggie or the pets. They decided to visit Bart's grave. Springfield was completely deserted, and as they walked to the cemetery, the houses became more and more decrepit. They all looked abandoned. When they got to the grave, Bart's body was just lying in front of the tombstone, looking just like it did at the end of Act 1. The family started crying again. Eventually, they stopped and just stared at Bart's body. The camera zoomed in on Homer's face. According to the summary, Homer tells a joke at this point, but it isn't audible in the vision I saw. You can't tell what Homer is saying. The view zooms out as the episode came to a close. Tombstones in the background had the names of every Simpsons guest star on them. Some that no one had heard of in 1989. Some that haven't been on the show yet. All of them had death dates on them. For guests who died since, like Michael Jackson and George Harrison, the dates were when they would die. The credits were completely silent and seemed handwritten. The final image was the Simpsons family on their couch, like in the intro, but all drawn in hyper-realistic, lifeless style of Bart's corpse. A thought occurred to me after seeing the episode for the first time. You could try to use the tombstone to predict the death of a living Simpson guest star. But there's something odd about most of the ones who haven't died yet. All of their deaths are listed as the same date.